because an SSL actually doesn't have very good live low end. So, you know,
you can keep talking. We're going live on YouTube just shortly.
Yeah.
And then I'm about to start everything.
Okay, great.
Starting.
Everybody recording locally.
Changing chat settings.
Cool. Recording locally, Caleb?
About to.
Cool. What's up, guys? Everybody cool?
Hello, hello,
Yes.
Hello. Everybody feeling awesome?
Cool. I'm not. Thanks. Cool.
Super cool. All right.
What's your? You're wearing a mastering.com t-shirt this time. No.
Wait.
Or is it a hoodie?
Not the same, Jake.
Warren, is it wrong to wear your own band's t-shirt on stage? Is that a?
I don't know.
Illegal.
I suppose if you're trying to sell t-shirts, probably not. No. I mean, if you go to see The Cure and Robert Smith, he's not going to, but if Robert Smith was wearing one of his tour t-shirts, wouldn't every single person who went, I'd buy one. I'd be like, oh, it's the same shirt Robert Smith wore live. You know?
I went to a Taylor Swift concert and the line for her merch was probably like 2.5 hours.
Wow.
I just got an invite to her show in LA.
No way, did you?
Yeah. So what happens? This is an interesting marketing thing. You heard about this one. What they do is a company goes out and buys like a whole bunch of box like tickets, and then says, "Hey." It's like an incentive. Like they're like, hey, you know, we're a staffing company in Los Angeles, and if you sign up with us for your staffing needs, we'll give you a pair of tickets to, you know, in a private box to see Taylor Swift live. I mean, they're probably $1,500 tickets.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah,
they're more than that. They're going it's going for like 10 grand and stuff. My wife is a massive fan, and she's dying to go to the LA show.
They were probably originally 1,500.
Oh, yeah. Originally.
Yeah. You know, Eddie Van Halen managed to maintain it, but fell out pretty badly with, was it Azoff? Yeah, Irving Azoff, his manager, because he found out not too long before he died that Irving actually co-owned the scalping companies. So Irving is basically commissioning Van Halen, getting 20% of his income from the show, on maybe a bare, you know, $100 ticket, and then his company is buying that $100 ticket and reselling it for $400 to $500 and making $300 on top. And Eddie wasn't getting any of it. He found out, and he's like, "If you're going to do that, it's totally unscrupulous." In America, you know, it's sorry, there's two English people talking to two Americans in America, but you know, under three Americans, under the guise of free market, you can get away with that kind of stuff, which is insane. That a scalper is making 75, 3 times as much profit as the artist and the venue.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Blockchain tickets.
Yeah, it's insane.
The whole Taylor Swift tour is like a whole industry. Like there's whole nation states involved, and which country's going to. It is remarkable the size of that tour.
She's a force to be reckoned with.
I think she's going to clear like 500 million from this tour or something like that. Remarkable.
Unbelievable.
God bless her.
God bless her. God bless Taylor Swift.
Are we ready to go, Caleb?
Not quite yet. We're going to give it about 5 more minutes while people are trickling in. We'll just
You're like, actually, we're live. We've been live.
Take a bit of banter. Yeah. No, we are live. Yeah. People are trickling in. Everyone's coming in. Where's everybody from in the chat? Welcome back to day 2.
Sweden. There it is.
I don't see. Oh, I see the chat now.
You can click on it if you want, yeah.
Woohoo!
Saw someone's in
Jamaica.
Nashville.
I saw Jamaica. I saw Denmark. So yesterday I went to, my family came up with me to Oxford as well, and so we went into that Westgate, that mall.
Oh yeah.
And there's a restaurant. You know about this restaurant at the top? It's a fusion restaurant of Japanese and Danish. The owners, it's at the top. You go to the very top, and it's like you got a view of the city, and it's a cool restaurant. But it's sushi and Danish food.
Is it sticks and sushi?
Yeah,
Is that, yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
So it's crazy. So you it's like I was like, what? They're like, yeah, fusion of Danish and sushi. It's Danish and Japanese, because one of the owners is Danish, the other one is Japanese.
Wow, that's interesting. So
It's delicious, yeah.
What was the example of a dish? Because that seems
Well, all the
wild to me.
Japanese, all the Japanese stuff was what you'd expect. But they had like these sticks where they would like, I don't know, you've eaten there. What would you describe it as? They had like,
It's weird. I think when we went, you just got loads of sushi. But
Right.
I'm trying to look and see what's.
it's pretty delicious. We got like a 3-person platter, and there was 4 of us, and we barely finished it. It's like a lot of food, and it was really reasonable for sushi. You know, 4 people in a sushi restaurant in LA is maxing out a credit card. This was, a fraction of the cost. It was expensive, it wasn't McDonald's, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like you weren't going to bankrupt yourself.
The chat's
that's the
on
only
the
thing-
chat. The chat's on point today. They got open-faced sushi sandwiches, sushi in a Dutch oven, sashimi with a side of meatballs.
Sushi in a Dutch oven.
I like sashimi with a side of meatballs. That's hilarious.
Of all the ones Caleb picks up, he picks up the sushi in a Dutch oven.
Amazing, amazing.
But what would be a Danish
Chat's
oven?
always very humorous. They're always great.
They had a lot of vegetarian food as well. Somebody saying they're vegetarian. There's definitely Jake's Pump Day shirt. Oh, he's changed. Oh, I see. He took off his hoodie, his mastering.com hoodie, and now he's wearing his Pump
You didn't
Day.
want to wear your own band's shirt, huh, Jake?
Yeah. Well, Michael's owning up to being a Swiftie.
I got my mastering.com gear on.
You got to get your Swiftie on. You got to get. You got to
I
represent.
can't afford it.
Oh,
I can't
Tay-Tay.
afford her merch. It was like it's like $150 for a wristband.
Wow.
Been priced
can't
out
support
of
the
Taylor
Tay-Tay?
Swift merch.
It's a really
Yeah.
comfy wristband.
I went to her Nashville show. It was incredible. I'm like a full blown Swiftie now.
How long did she play for? Like 2.5
3
hours. Or
hours.
something?
Yeah, 3
3 hours.
hours.
That's
Insane.
wild.
Wow.
Insane. And the crowd was the friendliest crowd. Like everybody was there. I don't know. It's crazy.
Like her or not, you have to have tons of respect for that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, there was a question there. Warren, do you have a list of Mike's used on the guitars in this project? Oh, thank you. I appreciate. In those days, if it was the small combo like the Pro Junior, I was actually front and back miking. So I put a 57 like on the front of the cone, and then on the back I'd put it exactly opposite, and I'd flip the polarity, reverse the phase, as it were, on the back mic, and then blend the two together. The guitar overdubs were done in my old Neve room. The basic tracking was done on an API, but the overdubs were done on a Neve. Why am I blanking? 8058, which is the 24 expandable to 28 channel console they made in about 78.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had one of those. The Bunker Studios in Brooklyn now has it. They bought it off me. Great console. I remember when I bought it for like a lot, like 105, and I sold it for 120. But I had it for 7. Had it for 7 years. They now priced it at like 240. It's like that's one of those. I should have just found a room and kept it in there. Pro Junior is a Fender, so 57 front and back. I maybe added a little 220 just for a little thickness, which I'll put a bit more low mids in there on the guitars that I may or may not keep at a mixed stage. Do you recall vocals using a Shure mic you're on now? An SM7? Yeah, many times. When I interviewed Ed Cherney, the great Ed Cherney, God rest his soul, I I asked him, I try to do this with engineers when I can, but I asked him if you had two microphones, what would they be? And he said to me, he goes, I could make a whole album on an SM57. Sorry, an SM7. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Caleb, before we start, I just want to ask two quick questions just to help get some data. If you can in the chat, how many people are here from the replays? Put a 1 in chat if you watched replays, if that's like the main way that you're watching these, or if you're trying to show up live every day. Live.
I'm trying to look for some of these questions. Is there any reason not to use Rode? No, there's no reason not to use it. I've got a couple of Rode mics. We've used them over the years.
Okay.
What instance do you use gain adjustment versus volume automation? You talk about in Pro Tools. I mean, it's the same thing because you're using clip gain. It's just turning
Well,
it
no,
up.
no, like keep the automation off your volume faders so that you can have those be something you can adjust later. You don't want to have those tied to an automation that's being controlled internal. So do all your automation on gain, and then use your volume faders to do the final touches of
Like static
turning
moves.
things up and down. Yeah, statically.
Yeah, I understand now.
One more
So,
question for the group here. SMS or email, what do you guys prefer as the best way to contact you guys? Because obviously we all know that I send a lot to make sure that you guys get here. So email.
Wow, that is surprising.
Interesting.
Facts.
And now I'm going to ask a question I already know the answer to. Too many emails or not enough emails? 'Cause I'm trying to balance. You have to understand, because
how many emails do you send?
Not too many.
well, we send emails when they register, and then we send emails the day before. But see, here's the problem. Everybody says too many, but if I send less, then less people show up. So I'm you gotta put yourself in my shoes. All right, I'm gonna try and make
for
it more,
you. It's
more
for you. It's
concise.
like my kid has pink eye right now, and
Yeah.
she hates the medicine, but it's
Yeah.
good for her.
Yeah.
It's
Here's the
for
thing.
you.
I can, if I do less emails on the next event and none of y'all are here, I'm gonna find all of you, and I'm gonna shoot you a nasty email.
Nasty facts.
Yeah.
A real nasty fax.
We're not
Hey,
trying to be annoying. We're just literally doing a 3-day free webinar with the greatest Warren Huart. So, come on.
Sorry to bug you.
Sorry to bother you, but
I'm gonna be like, hey Trisha, I saw you said that you were receiving too many emails and yet you weren't on the event today. Can you please reconcile that for me? Okay. Anyways, I'll thank you for thanks for the data, Caleb. You can go.
Michael. Love you, dude.
Michael's the fun guy at a party. If you can't tell.
I'm the guy in the corner who shakes my fist at the government or something.
What could I have done to get more people to this party? Did you guys want email or SMS?
Is the punch okay?
What should we have?
Yeah.
Did I put too much sugar in the punch?
Yeah.
Like, why won't you guys be my friend?
You should see the SMS responses I get from some of these people. That some people want to literally kill me, and I'm like, it's for a free event, man. Sorry. I like everybody.
Are those two things connected? Literally want to kill
SMS
you and the event.
Yeah.
Hey, one's in chat for Michael. None of this would happen without him.
Oh,
Exactly.
There's all the love. Yeah, there we
thanks.
go.
Oh, wow, look at that. That's a new pace. Thanks, guys.
You
Thanks,
think
guys
so?
and girls.
You think so?
Should we create some rock and roll history here, Caleb?
Let's do it. I'm ready to start jumping in
Marvelous.
here. Everyone, welcome back to day 2, Fix the Mix Challenge with Mr. Warren Huart. So glad you're here. So many of you came back. It's good to see. I know everyone has different time schedules. You're dealing with work. A lot of people are saying, oh, I got to hop off. I got a meeting, different things yesterday. That's why we post these replays later. So if you do have to come and go during the day, it's not ideal because you can't ask questions, but you can totally get a ton of great value. And then you can post your questions in the school community. I hope you're all in the school community by now and you were able to access that replay if you needed. But welcome back to day 2. So good to have you. Again, introductions. I'm Caleb Lovelace, the Director of Education for Mastering.com. We have Michael Gilbride down there, general manager of mastering.com. Rob Mazes, he's the owner and CEO. And Jake down there at the bottom is one of our mentors in the program. He's been doing this a long time, a wonderful teacher. You've seen him on the Fix the Mixes before, and if you haven't, he'll be doing them again in the future. Dana, it looks like his video's off, but he's here with us as well. And of course, Mr. Warren Huart, the man himself, mixing live today. We're so happy to have you. Thanks, Warren, for being here again with us. I know you're having to drive 2 hours each way to make this work for us this week. You have a lot going on. You're moving. You're on vacation. Your wife's mad at you, but you're here with us because you care about this stuff. So everyone, one's in chat for Warren being here. It's not exactly the easiest week for him, and yet he's showing up, giving us everything he can.
My wife's very patient. I'm not complaining about my wife. But no, we had one heck of a drive back last night, the M25. There's only two of us here that probably even know what that means, but it's the circular road that goes around the outside of London. It's pretty unavoidable. You know, you have to kind of get onto it and follow it for a bit and then get off onto the next motorway / freeway for the Americans that you need to get on. And on the way back, they had roadworks the whole way. And then there was a big crash, and then they closed down the motorway. So it was 3.5 hours to get back.
London folks, it sounds like you guys are as bad as the Californians. We're taking the M25 down to the 10, over to the 5, to the 1, down to Mulholland. Anyway, Saturday Night Live joke.
Remember, in LA, you have to say everything is taking the 101 to the
That's right.
The 405.
You've done both.
I've done both. I've experienced all. Yep. Anyway, I'll let you get back onto it without my waffling on about our drive. It's not that exciting. Let's talk music.
That's okay. I love waffles. All right, moving on. Just those housekeeping items from yesterday. Make sure that you go in and have your original sound for musicians clicked on in your audio settings in Zoom. Your high fidelity music mode selected. You want stereo audio there. You don't want to be listening to this in mono. It's not going to make as much sense. It's not going to sound as good. It's going to, if you do these settings and you have good internet, you should be hearing this in pretty good fidelity. I'll meet with personally, some of my mastering clients over Zoom, and I'm able to have a good conversation about mastering if all those things are in place. So you should be hearing this pretty well if you have these set up and you do have a decent internet connection. So set those up, and then make sure your chat settings are set to everyone. If you have it on hosts and panelists, only a few of us are going to see it, and we'd rather you have a chance to interact as a community and everyone talking together. We can all help each other as we go through this process. Day one action items, you should have gone and tried a volume only mix. How many of you did that? One's in chat. If you followed, you did the homework, it felt like you were back in school, but this is supposed to be fun. I can't see the chat. Are there some ones flying?
There's a ton of ones.
Oh, that's great. It's really important. Again, you can listen to me waffle on, as Warren says. You can listen to Warren do his thing, but it's not as powerful as getting in there and experiencing this for yourself, because this is where you find the process that works for you. That's what it's really about. There's a lot of different ways to do things. We have a very succinct process for all of you that we teach, but it's about finding what works for you, what works for your workflow, and what really speeds up your process. So you should have saved an alternate version if you were working on your own mix, removed all plugins, or if you were working on the mix that we gave you, just starting from the beginning. Bring all your faders down, bring them in one at a time. Bring your get a nice volume mix going. Make sure you prepped and edited everything, and then only used volume and panning. No plugins, no dynamics. How far were you able to take it? Were you impressed with how far you could take it without having to use any plugins? One's in chat for that. Was it enlightening? Did you get something out of that process? Well, I hope you did. If you didn't have a chance, you can always go back and start this later. Of course, we're going to be giving you more action items tonight, but it's all about you. It's all about getting in there, getting your hands dirty, and exploring. That's what it's all about. You won't get to Warren's level unless you just explore, practice forever, ever, and then eventually everything starts to become instinctual for you. The big picture concepts for yesterday was really just the power of volume. How far can we take things with just volume? Volume being our most powerful tool that we have. It really is. It's the thing that will affect every aspect of the mix the most, including frequencies, including dynamics. We talked about this yesterday. It's the most powerful tool, but it's also the least destructive tool, right? And so the more you can do with volume, the less you have to be destructive. And we can also be a lot more intentional. So we were intentionally placing things in 3 dimensions of space yesterday to get it pretty close. But we were also taking mental notes about what couldn't be solved with just volume. And that allows you on a day like today to go in and say, okay, I know what stuff really isn't working quite yet. I can solve that now with the fine tuning that comes with EQ and compression. And that's really what it's all about, working more intentionally on day 1 and now more intentionally on day 2. And what this will do is it gives you efficiency and precision. I'll tell you the number one thing when I'm working with people who are stuck kind of in that intermediate plateau, you're good, but you're not really able to quite get that professional sound that you're looking for, what you have in your head. It always comes down to speed and efficiency and precision. You need to be able to work with more confidence, with more intention, and speed up your entire process, because you realize that the longer you take on a mix, the longer you take on these different processes, the more your ears start playing tricks on you. And so the goal is to become so efficient and so intentional with all of this that it becomes instinctual, and you're not doing any guesswork. You're going in, you're solving the problems, you're working much quicker. And that is what elevates you to that next level. That's the thing. It's not some magic trick. It's really just speeding up your entire process that takes you from that 80% to 100%. So keep that in mind. This stuff, it may seem elementary, but you'd be surprised how many people are doing this stuff wrong, and it ends up causing them problems later. So the goals for today. What are we doing? We want to better understand when and why to apply EQ. We want to better understand when and why to use compression. So we're focusing mainly on EQ and compression today. We're not going to worry about any sort of spatial processing. We're not really going to go too deep on the vocal production today. That we will do tomorrow. And then also I want to teach you a little bit more about the mastering mindset. That's what I was talking about yesterday. Obviously, we are mastering.com, and I want to spend a little time teaching you what is kind of our core foundational principle that we work with our students on, which is learning to have a mastering mindset and an end in mind perspective. If you missed it yesterday, this is what I'm talking about. A lot of people start out, you get into production first, or you even start earlier than that. You start playing an instrument, you start singing. That's where your journey into music begins. And then maybe later you get a laptop and you get a DAW and you start playing with production, and it's a lot of fun. And, everyone, your friends and family are loving it. They're thinking it's pretty cool. And then maybe you start to realize that it only sounds okay and only your friends and family like it. And then you want it to sound a little bit better. So you start to get into mixing. And not very many people, honestly, ever learn that kind of dark art. It seemed like the only people that do mastering are like these old wizards in the industry with their long gray hair, like me. So, but that's not the way it should be. What happens is we were teaching mastering to, again, people for a long time. I mentioned this yesterday, people who had been in the industry for 10 or 20 years. And there's something very unique about learning mastering that is missing from the natural journey of the musician. That's very, very valuable. And we didn't understand this. We learned this from our students. They were learning mastering, but what was happening is the art of learning mastering was making them better at not just mastering, of course, but mixing and even production. It was filling in gaps of knowledge that you don't necessarily learn when you start from the beginning and learn production and start learning mixing, because it's very, very technical. You really have to start thinking about the quality of your room and your ears. You have to do a ton of ear training, and you have to have a deeper understanding of the tools than probably production or mixing will ever teach you. But even more importantly, I think, is that it gives you a different perspective. When you're a mastering engineer, you get all these mixes from people. And what you start to realize is that there's certain things people do all the way through the process, from the very first time they press record all the way through production and mixing, that make it either really great to master or really hard to master. And you realize pretty quickly what those things are. And it's this perspective you only get when you kind of sit in that mastering chair. You see the stuff that and the mistakes really that are being made all through the process. That's why we start our students with mastering and reverse the process. We call our program the reverse engineer for that reason, so that they can start with that end in mind process and then start to work towards that as we backtrack through mixing and through production. So realizing at some point that all the choices they're making all through the process are leading up to this moment where the master is either going to be able to become great or it's going to fall flat. So I want to teach you a little bit about, obviously I can't teach you everything about mastering. Even in 3 days, we couldn't do that. It takes tons of, we're going to have to work on your room. We're going to have to work on your ear training. We're going to have to dive deep. The process would take 6 months to a year to really get you there. But there are a few things you can start using right now in your mixing that can help you immediately. And so we're going to talk about a couple of those today. First thing I want to talk about is assessing frequencies. So if you, a mastering engineer pulls in a master, for example, one of the things we're going to be assessing are frequencies. And if what I just pulled up on the page here looks like a whole bunch of scary lines and numbers and different things, and you're not really familiar with how frequency analyzers work, let me break down what's happening here really quick for you. This is a screenshot actually taken from a previous Fix the Mix where we were talking about mastering a little bit more in depth. And we were comparing a bad mix, which is on the left, that left little PAS analyzer, to a good top 40 mix, which is on the right. And just to kind of zoom in on this a little bit more so you can see what's going on. You see on the right-hand side, you have what is pretty much a great curve. If you know the PAS analyzer, you know that it really should kind of start at about 60 hertz with your highest point of those lines and gently taper down to 16,000 being the lowest point, but it should be a pretty gradual decline. That's just how the PAS analyzer works. Different analyzers look different. Some of them are flat when they're accurate. Some of them taper down like this. But if you listen to enough music and analyze it through the PAS, you'll see that, 99 out of 100 top 40 tracks pretty much just have that nice gentle slope. Whereas we see the bad mix on the left-hand side is nowhere near that. You're even higher at 60 hertz. So you probably have too much bass. That fourth line over, that peak that you're seeing there is about 60 hertz. And then the top end is much, much lower. And realize that each one of those squares is actually 20 dB. So even though it doesn't look like much at 60 hertz, that's actually 10 dB more 60 hertz than it probably should be there based on your reference track, and maybe 10 to 15 dB less high end. Okay. So what's the point of all of this? Well, this isn't something you only have to do in the master. What all of you could start doing now, and this will be actually very, very important for some of you who don't have perfect rooms yet, this is a way to start to connect your eyes to your ears a little bit. So if you're working on a mix, for example, and you had a PAS analyzer in your master bus just to check, and you also had a reference track in there, you can start checking all along, hey, are my frequencies kind of in the same range as my reference track? Are they balanced? Is it doing that nice little slope? Now, why is this important? Because, obviously we want to get to the point where we're Warren and we don't really have to do this stuff because we hear it, but especially for the intermediate and the beginner and even some of the advanced, and especially if you're in a bad room, this can really save your life. It can kind of fill in the gap. I talked about yesterday, we're going to talk about some things that will circumvent some of these problems we have with room and ear training. This is a way for you to get in there and say, hey, I am in the ballpark. It doesn't need to be exactly the same, but am I in the ballpark frequency-wise as the other one? Now, why is this important? Well, if you sent the left-hand side to a mastering engineer and they had to turn down the bass and turn up the high end that much, there's no way that's going to sound very good. We're going to have to do so much destructive work to get it to where it's supposed to be that probably you won't like the result. If you've ever had a master come back, the mastering engineer is trying their darndest maybe to fix the problems that are there. And if you don't like it, it's probably not the mastering engineer's fault. It's something that needs to be fixed in the mix. So For those of you who are, you know, a little bit more advanced, want to get into this, some of this stuff, find a frequency analyzer tonight when you're working on your EQ and compression, throw it on your master bus and start comparing these responses to a reference track. Start connecting your ears and your eyes. The more balanced you can give that mix to a mastering engineer, the louder they're going to be able to make it. A lot of people think loudness comes from compression and limiting in a master. It's not. It's so much about the balance of EQ, because I can't even use a compressor or limiter effectively if the balance of EQ is out of bounds. If there's too much bass in there, my compressors are going to just overreact to bass. Bass carries so much sonic information. I'm not going to be able to turn that up very loud, or I'm going to have to turn the bass down a ton. And then you're like, where's all the low end? Because you think it needs to be there, but it's not even accurate. It just causes all these issues. So something for you to try that can circumvent problems maybe in your room. Another thing to assess are dynamics. So what we have here are transient peaks. You can see that there's some pretty big transients. You have your average level in there, transient peaks that are sticking up. There's a problem with this, again, when it comes to mastering. If you send a master to someone and it looks kind of like this, with tons of big transients, that means there's something that's hitting too hot in the mix, something you could fix. If I try to, again, try to compress this, it's not going to work very well as a mastering engineer. I'm limited in what I'm able to do for you, because really the mastering compression should be something that kind of glues the track together subtly. But what I'd have to do is start taming these big transients. So one of two things I'd have to do is either set the compressors to tame the transients, and then it doesn't touch any of the average parts of the track. It doesn't give that gluing to the track at all. Or if I set it to try to glue the track, then when it hits the transients, it's just way too much. Now, I could probably solve this as a mastering engineer, but it would take me forever, and I have to do a ton of destructive kind of work to do it. It's not ideal. So these are the types of end in mind perspective things I'm talking about. If you, for example, bounced your track down to send a mastering and you pulled it into a DAW really quick and it looks like this, you would realize that there's something wrong in the mix, the snare, the bass, something is happening in there that is too transient heavy, and that you need to go and fix that. And that's kind of the end in mind perspective that would really help you send to the mastering engineer something that is something he can or she can take really far and make sound really great. These are the things that we struggle with as mastering engineers. So that's something you can do. Bounce it down, check out the transients, look at them visually, what's going on there. And of course, there's always referencing that you should be doing, always be referencing. This is similar to what the PAS analyzer is doing. This is a Mastering the Mix is one of our partners. They make this great plugin called Reference 2. And you can pull in references. You can check multiple references. It level matches everything. But that graph down below is showing you the relationship of frequencies to your track. And you can kind of say, okay, again, am I in the ballpark? Am I not? This is another way of doing what we were talking about with the PAS. Though I still like to use the PAS because I think it's a little bit more accurate in that way. But you can totally learn to use this. It just requires to listening to a ton of good music through it, and also comparing it to your track. But you should if you're not referencing now and using references all the time, you have to. References are your anchor to objectivity. It's too easy, again, for your ears to start playing tricks on you the longer you spend with a mix. Even the best of us can have our ears start to get fatigued and things start sounding good that aren't really that good. And so you have to always have that objective foundation that you can build your track around. It's not pure subjectivity when it comes to this stuff. There's reasons why this stuff is powerful. There's reasons why we want balance. There's reasons why we don't want too many dynamics. And that's all going to come into play when the listener listens to it through their speakers. Speakers have limitations. The more balanced and the more controlled the dynamics are, the better it's going to sound coming out of speakers by the way, just by the way the speakers are constructed and why the way that they play psychoacoustically. So I know that's a lot to kind of fire hose at you. Some of the beginners are like totally lost, I'm sure, but some of the intermediates, this is the stuff that you're really going to need to focus on. A lot of the advanced guys who aren't doing this, start doing this and start connecting your ears and your eyes. And it can be very powerful for you as you assess your mixes. Hold yourself accountable, have an objective foundation, and it's going to push you a little farther. You'll learn a ton by just going through and using analysis tools like this. All right. Any questions on that? Any of that stuff so far? I'm not seeing the chat, but Jake or anyone can answer any of the questions that are coming through. If not, we can move on.
What's the name of that tool?
Which one? Which one?
I think probably this one.
Reference to.
It's called reference to by Mastering the Mix, but you can use any referencing plugin. Some people don't even use a referencing plugin. Some people will just drag the reference directly into the DAW, right? The point is, the high level concept is compare your mix against what the pros are putting out there.
Yep. Jake uses this plugin, the reference to. I tend to use two PAS analyzers like the first slide, just because I know the PAS really, really well. I know what they're supposed to look like when things are balanced and accurate. So I'll throw a PAS on the reference and I'll throw a PAS on mine. And just like I did a few slides ago, you're going to see that there's sometimes discrepancies, things to fix. And by the way, we tried to fix that that mix that was bad live, and we showed the limitation of what the mastering engineer was able to do, even though I think it was Dane at the time is a very, very talented mastering engineer. He was only able to make it sound slightly better, and it wasn't great. So the mastering engineer can only do so much. That's the truth of this. All right, moving on. Again, time to switch gears to mixing. I think it's so important to have that kind of perspective. No one really teaches that stuff. I know there's just very few people that understand the concept we're talking about of kind of end in mind learning with this mastering stuff. I know Abbey Road Studios, for one, though, does teach, for example, their engineers mastering, even if they're not going to master, for the reasons that we're talking about here. So there is method to this madness, and we found that.
Yeah, traditionally they all started off in the mastering rooms.
Yep.
All the engineers. We actually we flew to. We've obviously back in England now, but we were in England a month ago, and we did 9 videos of Abbey Road that will be coming out, and all of these guys just came up through the ranks. Like, they have to learn about mics, they have to learn about mastering, but mastering is the place that they all start before they're even allowed to record anything, and that's been since, I think Abbey Road is the oldest still working studio in the world. It might be the first purpose-built recording studio, actually, specifically, as a recording studio. So the point is like, yes, Caleb is exactly right. That is how it started. It was like, you want to be an engineer, go and learn how to master first.
Yep. That end of mind perspective will give you so much. So there is method to all of this. It's not just because it's our name, mastering.com. We've just been doing this long enough to realize the value of this, and to realize in many senses that people have been teaching music education kind of backwards for a long time, and maybe in a way that's less efficient. We're willing to say we've done that too, but we're also willing to say, hey, let's change our game. Let's do it right. Let's help our students the best way possible. So that's what we're doing. All right. Let's jump into mixing today. I'm just going to give you a few high-level concepts. Warren's obviously going to do so much of this in the demonstration, but there's a few things I want you to watch for today when it comes to EQ and compression. First, we'll start with EQ, and I just want to talk about a few EQ mistakes that people often make. First off, assuming everything needs EQ. I've seen a lot of people go in there and they just start throwing EQs on every channel. Because they feel like they need to, or they watched a YouTube video or someone did that, but that's not what it's all about. Again, we're starting to work with a lot more intention today, right? We know where the problems are, and it's not essential to go through and feel like you need to high pass everything, to go in and feel like you need to just turn an EQ on because maybe it'll be better. I mean, it's just kind of a mindset thing. Just solve the problems that need to be solved and enhance the things that need to be enhanced. That's what it boils down to. So don't assume everything needs EQ. Secondly, when dealing with masking, not being aggressive enough. So if you don't know what masking is, it's when different elements in the track are sharing similar frequencies and causing buildups or maybe even phasings at certain points in the spectrum. You'll see a lot of times this has to do with the mid-range. A lot of stuff has, an overabundance of mid-range energy. And so you get into that mid-range and there's just stuff clashing there. There's stuff building up. It's causing mud. It's causing boosts and attenuations, different things and different frequencies. So when dealing with masking, one of the things I think intermediates and even some advanced people make is not being aggressive enough. They're too worried, and Warren beautifully talked about this yesterday, about what something sounds like in solo, but not what it sounds like in the global sense, what it sounds like with the whole song in mind. And so I want to talk about just a principle really quick, that audio is greater than the sum of its parts. So what that means is, say you have all these things that are competing in the mid-range. I don't know that people are EQing aggressively enough to solve those problems. They're not really solving masking, and you end up still having a muddy mix in the end. And what that means is, if there's a bunch of guitars, for example, or some synths that are all in that range, you need to go in and decide what are the most important parts of each of those elements. What parts of those instruments are the most important, and what parts are adding the most to the song. And then you need to start playing kind of a puzzle game where you're highlighting those parts and really cutting out a lot of the rest. You need to make room for everything. So I have these kind of like 3 lines where those would be pretty aggressive EQs. It kind of looks even maybe more like this. And I've overlaid 3 EQs. Look how much I'm cutting on each of those EQs. Those are massive cuts. Now, you won't always do this, but this is just kind of an example, a case in point of moves you could make to start carving out enough space within those frequencies to highlight the points that are important. One of them in this example that sounds really good around the 200 range. One of them sounds really great in the 500 range. One of them sounds really great in the 2K range, and then just carving everything else out. And you think when you solo it, oh man, this sounds awful. This sounds terrible. This is just what's going on here. And you get scared. And so you pull the EQ back. That's what happens. You get scared in that moment, go, oh, that's too much. But what you're missing is the psychoacoustic effect of how everything works together. If you unsolo and listen to it together, what you realize is that even though you've made those extreme cuts, there are instruments covering every part of the frequency range. And what the ear hears is that it doesn't hear the cuts. That guitar you cut so extremely, because those frequencies are being covered, will sound kind of how it's supposed to. It'll sound like those frequencies exist because they're being taken care of by other instruments. They all start to sound full. They just don't sound muddy. So a lot of times we just need to be a little more aggressive with our cuts. Hopefully it makes sense. It's kind of a hard thing to explain, but it's really just about making choices, finding the most important parts of each of those instruments that are in those buildup areas, making extreme cuts, and then just trusting that when you listen to it globally, it's going to sound correct because all the frequencies are being taken care of. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll see some of that today with Warren. And then one last thing, I guess there's a couple more. Just be aware of EQ and phasing. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you do make big cuts like that, if you are on settings like 0 latency, for example, on Pro Q3, what happens is, and if you look at that top red circle, it's not showing up there, but what will happen if you were to make a big cut like that, it would actually add a bump of information right above that. It's actually going to increase the EQ. It's going to add information right above that. That's just the way EQs work. And so sometimes we're solving problems by making cuts, but we're not aware of what's happening when you, to the EQ that it's adding sometimes. And so we're maybe adding mud or something like that. The way to kind of solve that is just make sure you're using not 0 latency, but a non-destructive, more linear, or what's the other name of the other one? Sorry, it's slipping my mind right now. non-phase setting so that you're not getting these bumps in EQ. Just be aware of stuff like that. I don't think a lot of people realize that's what's happening. Sometimes when you're making big cuts, it can cause phasing problems because it's adding information right above where the cut is. And that can cause problems in your mix if you have the wrong setting on your EQ. And then last but not least, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this because it's sort of something you learn as a mastering engineer, but there's really a difference in how you do individual track EQ and bus EQ. Okay, with individual track EQ, it's like I was just mentioning, it's really just fine to make pretty big cuts in different things. Let me try to explain this though. The more information though you have on a certain channel, so for example, a bus or a master, there's a lot of instruments playing through one channel. There's something that starts to happen the more energy you're sending into one channel. Your EQ is going to respond differently than it does on an individual track because there's lots of different things, lots of different frequencies, and a ton more energy coming in. And what happens is every boost or cut you make actually affects the rest of the frequency spectrum more. Okay. So for in mastering, for an example, if I have something that has too much bass, when I take bass energy away with an EQ cut, it actually adds energy to the high end or to different other places, to mids and different things like that. You'll see that those will actually come up because there's a finite amount of energy you can pump through a single track. And bass takes, for example, a lot of that energy up. And when I take that away, it goes somewhere else. And that can happen in the high end too. If I take a bunch of high end away, it can actually add more low end or more mids. And so this also applies to any bus EQing you're doing in your mix, especially something that has a lot of energy coming through it. Just note that sometimes those EQs are going to be doing things more than just what it looks like on the graph. As you make boosts or cuts there, it's going to be adding or taking away information from other parts of the frequency spectrum. Does that make sense? And so you have to be a little bit more judicious with that. And I think it's also worth having a conversation with yourself about when to boost and when to cut. Sometimes people think, oh, there's too much of this thing here, I need to cut it. But sometimes what you need to do is just boost a different area and then it evens out because it takes energy away from that spot, or vice versa. I usually find it to be the opposite. But be aware, sometimes it's right to boost and sometimes it's right to cut. So I know that's kind of complicated. Is there any questions on that? Jake can maybe look through the chat and make sure that there's no one kind of lost on that principle.
Yeah, you guys can, who are curious about like linear phase, that's a Googleable topic. You can just Google that and go down the rabbit hole there.
Just be sure you're not, if you're doing big cuts, just don't have it on zero latency for now. If you don't want to have the problem, just make sure you're not on that setting.
When is it good to boost and to cut? Warren is going to show you.
Yeah, that always is a conversation, especially when you're studying mastering again. A lot of people just think, oh, there's a buildup, I need to boost. But sometimes you just need to add information somewhere else, and it's going to take some of the information away from the part you needed to cut by just adding some to a different spot. And you just need to kind of know when to do that. But I think the simple answer is do what is least destructive. Do what's the easiest to get the result that you want. And that's just something you'll have to play with. And Warren's going to demonstrate that today. Any other questions?
There's a lot of very kind of like specific questions that I think a lot of this stuff can probably be Google searched, YouTube searched, and a lot of these gaps are going to be filled inside of Warren's demonstration here.
This is just stuff to watch for today. As Warren goes through, he can kind of point out times when he's talking about these principles.
Yeah.
Or when he's demonstrating these principles. But I wanted to give you some high level stuff. You can always go back and watch through this again and then start playing with this stuff. See what happens when you do these boosts and cuts, how it affects the rest of the frequency pattern just for the sake of sonic energy. Move on.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're good to go.
Okay, one last thing before we jump in to Warren's demonstration. He wanted to talk a little bit today and give us a kind of a master class in serial compression. This is, Jake, when he's doing his, we kind of get a master class in clipping and limiting for dynamic control. But Warren works a little differently, so he's going to give us a master class in serial compression. It's really about painting with the colors of the compressor. He loves to have and use different compressors, lots of different ones, because they have different behaviors, they have different sonic characteristics, and then you'll see him blend these characteristics together. Okay, and that's a lot of fun. You can create really serious tones. You're affecting more than just transient control. You're also affecting the color of the track. You're affecting frequencies with a lot of the things you can do with compressors. So this should be really fun watching a master class in serial compression. He'll explain a little bit more about exactly how to set that up, exactly how that looks today as you go forward. Who's ready though for some demonstration? That's some high level stuff. That's some high level stuff for you guys to watch out for today. But
you guys ready to go? To 263,782 in the chat if you're ready to go.
It's demo time.
0.3972.
Oh, we'll get to decimal. That's day 3 stuff. That's day 3 stuff.
371.
All right.
Okay, so share screen.
Check that it was it's set to stereo. Where it says share sound, click the little arrow.
Yep, says stereo high fidelity. So share. Is all looking good?
Yep.
Beautiful.
Just play something quickly.
You once lit me up like a cigarette.
Marvelous. How is everybody doing today? Or are you all doing marvelously well? I do hope so. Where we left off yesterday was there was still a couple of little edity kind of things that we were going to do as well. So we can definitely touch in, because what we did with what I call a static mix, for those of you, the reason why I call it static is because of the SSL world. When you would first pull up the mix and you would get to a level where you were pretty happy with it, but you hadn't done any automation yet, you would call it a static mix. I don't think we're quite the traditional static mix at the moment. That's probably going to be where we're at the end of today. Because a true static mix on an SSL, for instance, did have EQ and compression, just didn't have any automation. So that's really where we're going to end up today. So there's a couple of things I think that are worth recapping. We had gone really mono and narrow at the beginning of this track, and we were anticipating that when the chorus came in particular, we were going to pan the guitars super, super wide. So we have done zero panning, automation panning. We're going to have to do that at this situation in this lesson today, because otherwise we're not going to be able to mix the song, because there is quite a lot of times where there is a one guitar which becomes doubled at certain times of the song, hence the choruses. And you'll see here there's an intro lead, etc. down here. I can play it to you, for instance. And these parts are on the same track. So quite often, especially if the band was tracking live, which essentially rhythm guitars, bass, and drums were done live. And that guitar can be, that performance might be what he does as a live performance. So he's playing the verse part, he's playing the pre-chorus, he's playing the chorus. However, obviously outside of a live situation, in a studio situation, that guitar part is going to become something that gets moved around to serve different purposes. Hence, the verse being narrower and then going wide in the choruses and a double of that guitar coming in. So where we left off last night was the static mix, where it sounded pretty darn good up until pre-chorus and chorus, where we knew we were going to have to do pan automation. That's typically something I would leave to the end if all the guitar parts were separated, so that, say, the verse guitar and the chorus guitar were in separate situations. We could have separated them out, but I didn't really see a need for doing that. Okay, so One other thing I think that's worth talking about that we're going to encounter here is this album that I did with this band a few years ago. They came in having played the songs a lot live, and I just completely pulled them all apart. So the drummer was the guy that really got beaten up the most. And so there's all these stops and builds and different drum parts that he literally was wrestling with in 1 week's worth of pre-production to replay and all of the grooves were different, all the parts were different. And one of the things that a lot of drummers have a hard time with is 4 on the floors and grooves like the Motown groove, where you're alternating between kick and snare. So I'm just going to quickly recap that for anybody who was here yesterday, or if you're new to this. The problem was we go to a pre-chorus which goes up in energy. Have a listen. So we're coming out of the verse here. Entering the pre-chorus here to a Motown groove. But you see what's happening. He's got boom, da, boom, doom, boom, ba, toms. And he goes bat, bat, boo, bat, bat, boo, bat. Because that was a challenge for him to play. So there's a couple of things we could do quickly. We could just come out of the main drum groove. And why don't we just simply boost the snare in this section. And we could do that with clip gain. So I'm just going to go to about here and just separate that out for the heck of it and just clip gain it up and see whether that helps us. I don't ever have a problem with doing these kinds of things. So as you can see there, I brought the snare bottom up quite considerably. I could do the same for the snare top. So these are just these kind of preppy things that could be interesting to note. It's a better transition now, but it's not lighting up the room mics as much. One of the problems we're going to have is because he keeps the kick consistent, that if I bring up the room mics, I might also bring up the kick a little bit, but because of the room close, I like those. I'm going to bring those up ever so slightly. Again, it's like what we were talking about with Caleb yesterday, is that this kind of work before you even apply EQ and compression can really, really help, and saves us a lot of like extra compression and parallel this and parallel that just by editing the files before we even start mixing. Okay, it's better. It's not perfect, and I will do that to the second pre-chorus as well. But yeah, I just thought we would sort of encounter that before we encountered this in the mix. We would do that. Okay, so here's the drum sound. Now, there's a lot of floor being played here. And the problem with that is, or the reality with that is a lot of the low end on the floor is going to smother the kick drum and also the bass guitar. As you note, we're not using any samples on this at all. Now, here's an interesting situation. I heard a rack tom. Dun, dun, dun. But I don't see one because we gained down some stuff. So let's just do this. Never too late to rectify mistakes. So we brought it down about 18 dB. There it is. Woohoo! There you go. That was missed yesterday. So recap. If you watched yesterday's recap, you'll notice I missed a tom, but we found it and brought it back. Okay. So we've got a problem. There's a busy kind of floor tom part going on. And if we throw in the kick in and kick out, First thing we can do is just turn it up, see what it does. Let's go to full drum group and see how that feels now. It's good, but it's going to be a bit of a problem for us. We might have to run automation at a little bit of a later stage. If we throw in the bass now, which has, again, no EQ or compression or anything yet. And if you refer to yesterday's video as well, for those of you, I know it's up on YouTube, they can, I'm sure there'll be a link under this video. You'll note that this was one of the first talking points we had when we listened to the original mix, which had been done on SSL. One of the biggest faults with that mix was the fact that when the bass, the floor tom, and a kick were playing in this intro section, the kick had just been smothered. And it was mixed on an SSL with, you know, no clever plugins like we have now. So we couldn't really do the kind of automation that you can do with plugins. I really like that bass sound, and that's just the DI and the Sansamp. Put the whole band in. Okay, so I'm going to do some stuff which is probably quite straightforward for many of you when it comes to EQ points on the drums, etc. There's a lot of bleed on the kick out mic. When we shifted, if you yesterday go back and watch the video, you'll notice I used the time adjuster and I actually dropped the kick in mic slightly back a little bit. And I was being asked why I wouldn't pick that up and drop that back, and I just said I like to keep things in their original place, so if there's any editing you can always make sure that the phase is consistent. But you can also use auto-align plugins if necessary. I've experimented with them and do enjoy them, but by lining up the kick in and the kick out, I actually shorten the decay of the low end slightly, because the low end was tight at the front. Now I'll zoom in to show you. You see it's delayed by, let's see, samples. If you go up here, 141 samples on average, and guess what? I delayed it by 141 samples. So it means this first part of the kick drum is really big, but the second half of it, or second three-quarters of it, actually starts to cause some phase cancellation, which I don't mind because it's actually reducing the low end after the initial hit. Because we're gonna be battling a lot with, again, you know, the bass guitar, the floor tom, and the kick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some really generic stuff. So you're probably used to the kind of EQ I'm going to do here. I'm going to grab a Waves REQ4. I will tell people this is my idea of stock. I bought the Waves Platinum bundle in the 1900s. I believe it was 10 grand. I think it was 9,950. And if you were a quote unquote professional in those days, it was like the only thing that, like, nobody else did this kind of level of plugins. Now it's commonplace, but in those days. So you can use any plugin. For me, this is my version of a stock EQ. So I'm actually going to roll off some high end. I usually do it at around about 20. I don't need, there's no 808s in this song. It's not in that world. So I'm going to come in about, 20 and high pass. The second thing I'm going to do is just kind of look for some low lows in there. So let's just listen to the kick in. Let's take this probably to about, you can tap on here, to around about 60. So give it a listen. Bypass it. Back in. So that's pretty cool. Now, things I don't like about it. Oh, it sounds great in solo. We had this conversation yesterday, and Caleb was reinforcing it today about listening in solo. You put that in with a kick out and everything, the low end is going to be massive. But worse still, it's actually going to kill my bass guitar and the floor tom as well. So what I'm going to do, and this is gold dust. Most of the techniques I've been teaching for the last 8 years of doing YouTube have been reproduced by everybody in many, many videos. But this one is I've yet to see people actually steal yet. So be prepared to see it. So what I do is go in about between 80 and 100. So this just for the heck of it, say 90 hertz. I'm actually going to cut. I'm actually going to cut that area because this will allow the floor tom and the bass guitar to breathe. Can narrow the Q a little bit. And I'll go back to my kick boost and narrow that Q a little bit. So what I've done is I've reinforced the 60 area that I want, the sort of 40 to 60, because I don't mind a little bit of 40 coming up in there as well. Quite often when I'm mixing on a console, I use a DBX subharmonic synthesizer, which is a 120, and I go to about 36 hertz and do a little bit of subbiness to it. It's really nice. Gives you a little oomph underneath the mix.
And by the way, this is what a Pultec would essentially do if you're boosting and attenuating. Exactly. Have the boost and attenuation. It would look somewhat similar to this EQ curve here. That's the cool thing a Pultec does.
Yeah, I love Pultecs. Working with Jack Douglas, who obviously did Toys in the Attic and Rocks and all these incredible records, they use a lot of Pultecs. I mean, I think there's a photo somewhere he's got where he's like standing, I think, in the record plant, and it looks like there's like 80 Pultecs behind him. It's just like Pultecs. Yeah. Now with like vintage Pultecs being worth, like a car. Can you imagine? It's probably like $500,000 worth of Pultecs behind him. Yeah, insane. And they like it because the passive EQs, there's a sort of roundness to the low end of a Pultec boost that's just not achievable with any other EQ. Okay, so let's throw in the kick out, or let's listen to the kick out on its own first of all, actually. Now, that's beautiful. The low end on that is so good. But there's tons of floor tom bleed in it. So let's just see, we're on Rob's computer. Let's see what he's got. Do you have a transient designer in here lurking?
You could use the Oxford one. I've got Spiff. That's same company do Smooth.
We do like Spiff.
I've got the Waves one, like Smack Attack.
Oh yeah, Smack Attack. There it is. That's dumb. I'm trying to think of something easy to use. So I like this. This is basically just a really dumb, easy. It's Waves' version of a transient designer because you've got attack and sustain. So let's go on to the kick out. And another way to do this is actually just to use a gate. Simple as that. If you don't have a transient designer, there's actually 2 or 3 different ways of doing it. Let's mute this for a second. I'll show you. You could use a compressor. Because I know Caleb's anxious to get some compression tips. Look, take my version of a generic compressor would be the R-Comp, the Renaissance compressor. Now, listen to this. See what it's doing? It's got a slow attack time. This is the default setting. You can do this on 1176 default. And you hear it's letting the attack come through quite dramatically. What I could then do, and I've done quite frequently, is I'll actually take another compressor. So maybe just mute this for a second. And try this one for size. So let's go and grab I love doing these things. So let's see what the floor tom is doing and see whether what I'm about to experiment with is even possible. It looks like he's playing too much on it, but I love doing this on overheads. So I won't forget, I will show this trick on overheads. What you can do is you can compress the snare out of the overheads by side chaining, put a compressor on the overheads, take the snare send, go to it, and every time the snare plays, actually have it duck the overheads. And you're not doing it necessarily to completely remove the snare from it, but actually make the snare more exciting. Now that I've started talking about it, is this going to confuse people for me to quickly go over to it, Caleb? I'm excited to show the technique.
No, go for it.
Okay, good. Sorry, everybody, if I'm moving from one thing to another, but I love this technique. It's one of my favorite ways to make overheads sound better. Most importantly, make snares sound better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab good old fashioned, R comp again. Whatever DAW you're in, this is just my stock plugins because they're what I've been using for 20 years. So now I'm going to take a send from my snare. We'll go to bus one, seeing as it's the first one available. We'll also make it pre-fade, meaning I can now mute my snare top. Bypass it. Put it on. Doesn't that immediately give you the SSL snare? Because what I'm doing is it's got a default slow attack time. I'm sidechaining from the snare. So every time the snare plays, it allows just a gnats of the attack of the snare to come through. It's really nice. And if you've got room mics, the room mics will fill in a lot of like the ambience of the cymbals anyway. And it becomes like this great way to make your snare just a little bit more exciting. Have a listen. Bypass it. I put it back on, and it just adds a little tiny spankiness to it, a tiny, tiny amount of spankiness to it. I'm a big fan of doing that. Some people do it with a sample, which they then use to only trigger the reverb, just because if it's a sample, it doesn't have any bleed associated or errant kind of hits from other drums or whatever. But the snare's pretty clean on this track. You can see, listen obviously, but you can see there's not a lot of, it wasn't heavily compressed going in, so you don't have like tom bleed. I get given tracks sometimes where the snare, there's a tom like almost as loud as every snare hit because the way the mic has been positioned on the snare and the rack tom's so close, and it's the snare's overly compressed that you hear the rack inside of the snare. In this instance, we don't have that problem. Okay, so let's get back to what we were trying to do with the kick out. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave our comp off a moment. We're going to have a little play with the attack and release times. In this instance, attack and sustain. Go to the shortest duration here. I was listening to the different shapes it's giving me on sustain. Not set on anything yet. I'm actually just experimenting and listening. So what we could do, just for schnitz and schniggles, is use the kick against itself. So let's try that. Let's open another bus here. So we're going to go to bus 2. And again, we're going to do pre-fade. So what I've done is I've created a send from the kick in, which doesn't have as much floor tom bleed. And let's see what we can do. Let us grab a gate, talking of gates. What is the free one that comes of it? I always forget the free one is called, oh, yeah, it's called the Dine, isn't it? I didn't expect you to know because you're a logic guy. Yeah.
It's been a while.
So what I'm doing is I'm going to key from the kick in. I don't even need to hear the kick in to do this because I sent it pre-fade. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking kick in and I'm sending to kick out. Let's sidechain. Now, I don't want the range to be completely on off like that. That would just sound dreadful. I'm not trying to make this sound like some terrible gated kick drum from the 80s or gated snare kind of thing. I'm just trying to increase the transient and decrease the sustained stuff in between, which is where the floor tom is. So we can dial this range control up a bit. Now, with this, I wish there was some kind of mix knob on this, and the range might help us a little bit more. Bypass it. Back in. It's not perfect, so let's hear it with the rest of the drums. It's much better than what we were dealing with the original mix, though. Again, samples, etc., will make this easy. And that's what most people do. They put in a sample here and they'll work around it. What we're doing here is, because we're trying to teach like actual mixing principles, these are the kinds of tricks that we do, you know, especially in a pre-sample age, or where you're trying to, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, you know, protect the integrity of the original recording. And also, I'm trying not to use too many super fancy plugins, because there are a lot of super fancy plugins out there. Bearing in mind, a lot of you probably don't have $25,000 worth of plugins. Not everybody's Rob. Throw him under the bus. But I'm starting to hear separation now. I'm starting to hear the kick coming down the middle. The floor is definitely, you know, panned the way I do it, audience perspective, where in the original mix and before we did this, because there was so much low end bleed and so many floor toms coming through, that the floor was kind of in this, where is it coming from area. So speaking of floor, because we're trying not to mix too much out of solo, now that we have all the drums together, let's go to that floor and just drop in an EQ on it. Again, I'm going to use an REQ. It's my idea of a stock one. I'm going to see if I can find the fundamental without soloing it. So first thing, let's go in and just mess around. It's a tough one. It really wants to live around about the 70 area. So I'm boosting that up 70 to 80. I'm going to come in there and do the very generic, obvious low mid cut. See what it sounds like in solo. Now that we've done it in the context of the kit. Sorry, this keyboard is different to mine. Take the EQ off. It's definitely better. I'm going to widen up the Q a little bit. I'm actually going to pan ever so slightly more. Maybe go as much as 60% away from it. Now, I love the sound of the kick out. I feel like the way it was gated has reduced some of what I love about it, unfortunately. So I'm going to rely a little bit heavier on the kick in here. So the kick in, let's grab, I'm going to change this over to a 6-band EQ so I can do a little bit more work, a bit more aggressively. So I'm going to come in here at about 350 as well. Let's go in there, do some simple things. I'm going to bring up the rack tom a little bit. And I hit my master bus a little hard here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah, that's the only thing. So here's a good lesson. You know, when you're boosting EQ, you're turning things up quite dramatically. Cool. Okay, so let's bring in that bass again. Say it again.
Could you maybe bring down the trim on the master?
Certainly.
Say 3 dB.
Sweetly. We were cranking it so much yesterday that we've probably lost all the latitude we had.
Should do it.
Now, in this situation, there's some really generic things that I want to do. Let's go in and just listen to the rack for a second. Oh, did I mute my mic by mistake? Can you hear me?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, it's just I was doing a quick key thing here that seemed to be operating Zoom. Okay, I'm going to do some similar kind of EQ on the rack tom. So I'm actually going to high pass a little bit higher. As you can see, the fundamental of that is a little bit around about 100-ish. Going to pull out some low mids. Now, I don't know how Caleb feels about this, but I like EQing the EQ. I have absolutely no problem with doubling up everything we've been doing. So what I'll do now,
I like subtle breaking things up over several things. I think is better than like large swaths.
Great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bus my kick to one place. Sorry, this keyboard's ever so slightly different to what I'm used to. So just going to call this kick. I always make this joke. You can call it kick sub, you can call it kick auxiliary, you can call it kick bus. It's all the same thing. Kick group. People say to me, what's the difference between a subgroup, an auxiliary, a group, or a bus? I'm like, there isn't. It's just what everybody has their own name for that thing. I'm calling it kick sub here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just bringing the kick drum into one place, and we'll grab an EQ. And this is both the elements of the kick. Oh, it defaults to a bus. Okay, give me a second. All right, here we go. So I'm globally doing that. I'm actually going to, again, grab this as a 6-band because I'm also going to pull out a little bit of that 80 to 100 again, and then we can throw in the bass. So like I say, not a lot of people do this, and I see massive build-up. Sometimes when you have 3, even 4, I've seen people, 4 mics on a kick drum. The area that always seems to get really, really stodgy and too much of is the 100 hertz kind of area. And don't get me wrong, I love 100 hertz on a kick drum if it's applicable, especially in dance music where you might want the kick drum to be more like in 100, 150, 200 area, and then have a super huge subby bass underneath. But in rock, I want my kick drum actually to sit, the fundamental, the low end, to sit below the bass guitar.
Everyone should go back and watch this.
Cool. So I'm happy with that.
Warren, a lot of people struggle with the how to create separation with kick and bass. I think you're giving a kind of a master class on that right now. Everyone who's, we're going fast and everything, go back and watch this stuff, because this is how you create that separation that's just so hard to do.
It is interesting. I like I said, I've watched people do so many of the techniques that I've been doing for years. I've stolen from great people as well, don't get me wrong. And I've seen those videos get
It's not a magic wand though. I mean, it's just knowing how to use EQ and compression really, really well. There's no fancy like plugin that's doing this. It's just EQ and compression. It's just going back to the fundamentals and doing it really, really well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So now I've created a group of just my snare and my kick. So let's have a quick listen. The snare is not overly exciting at the moment. I'm actually going to be dramatic with the. I personally, again, I'm just going to high pass. It's defaulted to about 60 hertz. That's fine for me on the snare. We'll start messing around about the 100-ish area. It seems that there's already a dramatic boost at about 200. If this was done with my Neve, or it was on my API, there's probably a 200 kind of boost done on the EQ. That may have been one of the things going in. I'm going at about 5, 6, 7, 8 on the top end. Underwhelming in the snare at the moment. We've been relying on the rooms to make the snare sound really, really good. Let's go and grab something 1176-ish. Here's the generic. Well, here's the crystal algae one. This is the most basic 1176. Now, for those of you that don't know, 1176s, they're fixed threshold compressors, meaning here's the threshold. The more you turn up the input, the more it compresses. The other thing always to remember is 1176 is backwards to the way you think it works, meaning the high number is the shortest time and the low number is the longest time, which really confuses everybody. I'll demonstrate it again. Look at the meter, listen to the snare, and you'll notice, well, have a listen. Now flip it all the way to the other side. The release time is so slow, it's barely coming back. Not digging the time adjuster here. Something is not working for me on here. Has this been... Yeah, the bottom snare is really killing the low end on the snare. You hearing that? So there's a couple of things I can do. And I have no problem with what I'm about to do. You might all freak out. I'm going to grab an REQ. Again, use only stock. And I'm going to go boom. You might go, what the heck has he just done? What I've done is I've actually taken off the low end on the bottom snare, which is causing some phase issues with the low end on the snare top. I don't have a problem with doing that. It's a little bit like Bob Marlette does it all the time. He has like 2 or 3 different elements on a kick drum. He chooses which one of the elements of the kick drum is going to have all the low end, and then shapes it and uses little elements, then blends it back together.
It's going to give it more low end now, ironically, even though you're cutting out low end on one of them, because now they're not phasing and canceling each other out.
Exactly. That confuses people usually, but it's a little bit like with guitars. Like when you were talking about the boost and cut in the same area with certain EQs causing that issue, mixers for years have loved that. So what we'll do is we'll go up to an SSL and we'll go up to maybe 120 on a guitar and high pass it and then boost 120 at the same time to actually create this big shelf. Because if the fundamental low end on an instrument is say 150 hertz or whatever it might be, boosting below that doesn't make it feel any warmer. But if you find the fundamental and then boost it and then actually cut the low below it, you'll feel like there's more low end because you're actually hitting the fundamental, the low end of it. Now what I've done is I've gone to the snare top and I've actually boosted some low lows. And what I would do with a pole check is actually boost below where it is so I get a nice shelf. One of the advantages of maybe boosting below is that you get this nice lift. It's typical in like the Marg EQ on the high end. What they often do on with the Marg is like that, you know, that air band is at 32 kilohertz, which everybody is like, what's crazy? No human being, even when they're born, can hear above 20K, which I agree. But if you take a really super high frequency and boost it with a very, very gentle shelf, it's going to really make everything in, you know, in the audible range gently come up. So there's not really a problem with doing that. I had to put our release back to the fastest time because I was demonstrating how it was slow, and it was like, why does the snare sound like crap? It's because the release time was set to the slowest time. bringing down the snare bottom just a little bit. Let's throw in our bass guitar. Did you hear what I heard? There it was. Little errant rack tom that was played really, really quietly. And when I brought down that section, it was barely audible. There it is. Well, you live and learn. That's the wonderful world of digital. Undoing these things is so easy. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to do some generic stuff. I'm going to listen to the overheads quickly. Take that compressor off a second. Put it back on. I just love that little it's doing to the snare. I know it's subtle, but I really like it. Okay, I'm just going to high pass any low rumble out. I'm actually going to move the compressor afterwards. So if there's low frequency, Caleb can probably talk about this, wax lyrically about this. But one of the great things about high passing is it gives you more energy and volume, because you get tons and tons of low end, unnecessary low end in all of your microphones. And that might be a couple of dB here, a couple of dB there. It builds up. So when it comes to your master bus, you've got all of this low frequency information, which is completely unnecessary, which takes up so much energy and perceived volume, and actually makes your track sound quieter. Great. I'm going to do a similar thing to my hi-hat. I'm actually going to copy this EQ down. So this is actually the EQ. Let's go somewhere where the hi-hat's playing even. So we'll listen to our rooms in solo. Carry on.
Something that Devon did I thought was really cool. If you fix the mixes back, he started, instead of doing those big cuts like that, he would do really aggressive shelves.
Sure.
And so it keeps a little bit of the harmonic information down there. He found that it just gave it a little something. And he actually tested, and he found that a lot of the Neve and API consoles are actually doing that. They're not doing aggressive cuts; they're actually doing shells. So it's kind of something interesting to play with, just as we're nerding about this stuff.
No, totally. I don't think one of the things that's super, super important to know is know how your stuff was recorded. For instance, this all went through. All of the basics went through an API 20 channel, and then all the 20 channel console built in 71, and all the overdubs were done on a Neve built in 78. And a lot, there's a lot of extra schnizzle on this. If this was a fully in the box Focusrite 2i2 mic pre's, I would be sitting here with a lot of emulations trying to add some dirt and girth and stuff like that. And I think a lot of what you were talking about, if he's probably mixing stuff, which especially virtual stuff, you really do have to add some of that extra pizzazz to it,
or at least don't cut it all out.
And also don't cut it all out, because here we have a wealth of it.
You have a lot.
So I cut some 350 and took us some low lows. Have a listen before. Bring it on. It's really helping the snare bite. I'm actually going to pull that down. I'm actually going to pull this down onto. Sorry, this is a different keyboard. You know what it is, Rob? It's like, is this like a laptop version? Because it's got an extra key on it. Because the control is usually on the far left. So I keep hitting the wrong one. All right, I'm learning to use it all over again. Yeah, so that low mid cut and the low cut on the rooms has helped that snare just breathe a little bit more. Let's bring in the bass. Throw in one of these guitars. This is the singer's rhythm guitar, which is ugly. Now, there's a lot of bite on that snare, which might end up being perfect once everything else has got some low mids cut, some low end cut, a bit of brightness. But at the moment, for my ears, it's really like, ouch. Plus, you hear the bell on those tambourines, don't you? Like going ting, ting. It's bright. Quite often, people will take tambourines and apply a little saturation to it, believe it or not. This one, it's got a head on it, which I prefer, to be honest. I like that movement, so I'm actually just going to whack a compressor on it because I'm not hearing enough. At the moment, all I'm hearing is bish, bish, just hitting on the snare, which is okay, but you got an omnipressor. This is one of those, what does it really do? We don't know. No, this is the omnipressor. The Eventide omnipressor is such a fun device. The hardware version of these are so good. Okay, now I'm hearing a bit more the ucha, ucha, ucha. I might change that later, but I like it at the moment. Okay, let's go to our bass guitar for a minute. I'm nowhere near done on the drums, by the way. I'm just like to move quickly through things and see how they all sort of sit together on each other. So here's the bass DI. It's pretty darn even with the low end, to be honest. And then the Sans amp is just adding disgustingness and blended together. So I think my only potential concern, although the phase is really good, I might not do much to this bass. I might not do my usual trick because I think it's pretty darn good. When I mixed it in the Neve originally for the album, not the SSL version, but the Neve one, all I really did was boost some 110 on it and do a little bit of high passing on the sound, the two elements together. So I think at the moment I'm probably going to let it slide, and let's just hear it from the top.
You once lit me up like a cigarette.
Yes, there's some fun stuff. I know we're not going to move into space stuff at the moment, but the effects are going to going to be a lot of fun tomorrow. Now this is dark and this is ugly. I'm trying to remember the amp, but I think it's got a big muff on it, which is why it's such an ugly guitar sound. And I mean ugly in a good way. We were trying to come up with things that were more, not because we're using Pro Genas and AC15s a lot, but we didn't want it to be just like the most bog standard guitar sound. We actually wanted ugliness to it. So I'm experimenting with some high passing there. I've actually gone up quite, maybe not that high, like 94. So let's do this. Let's throw in the bass guitar. I'll take it off. I think maybe a little dip here. It's a tough one. It's going to be in context with the band, but yes, that little high passing. Actually, I think it can come up a bit more. It's definitely an ugly guitar tone. So the lead with it. Now, yesterday we talked about taking DIs and doing weird things to them. So I don't know, Caleb. I really want to throw a reverb on that, but we'll leave it till tomorrow.
Sounds good.
He's like, no, not yet. Don't do it yet. Now, there's some ugliness in those guitars on the low lows that I think can be cleaned as well. Let's have a quick listen to the hammered organ first. And this is a real one, as you can tell. There's a little distortion on it. My cab is a little wonky, but yeah, that's a real one. There's like some low rumble there that you can hear and see that is unnecessary. And when we come to the automation, I will push that rise. That should be, we'll make that come up. That'll be a fun thing. Okay, we can't avoid the fact that the vocal is really screamingly mid-rangey at the moment. So there's multiple things I will do. Yesterday we were talking briefly and showed just kind of a basic EQ lift. We do have fancy plugins now. One of those, of course, is OX Sound Soothe 2, which didn't exist anywhere around when I recorded this. I mean, it's a revolutionary plugin. But if you don't have access to this, a couple of things I would do. First thing is I would just high pass, because before I do anything, I don't want to be compressing low end information I don't need. And so let's just get rid of that.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now
Typically, you'll see most people boosting about 200 to 300 hertz on a vocal, knowing that's where most of the low end fundamental is. I don't know if I need to boost the low mids on that. One of the things I'll do is like high pass all of the low rumble out, which can be air conditioning noise or just, you know, kicking the stand or rumble or whatever. But I just get rid of it because it's unnecessary. But what if I really want to bring some of that thickness back? Honestly, the Arvox, which is probably usually on sale for $29, is a remarkably good plugin. Have a listen to it on and off.
you once lit me up like a cigarette.
I mean, it's already evening stuff out. Let's see if we can get a relatively even level so you can hear it on and off.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and
Is it off?
you once lit me up like a cigarette, and
Back on.
you once lit me up like a cigarette, and
You can hear a little bit grabbiness on it, but you can also, it brings in some of the girth as well.
you once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
I have absolutely no problem with, like I said, you know, using serial compression. What I'll typically do now is brighten. This is not using the Soothe 2, of course. I would brighten the vocal. So, you know, probably a little less than that, but about 7K-ish.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now
There's words that are dipping a little bit. Yesterday, we were talking about doing some editing for that.
you once lit me up like a cigarette, and
Like that Anya is far too low. So we can just gain that up independently. And then come in here and just smooth that transition out.
cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned
Now, there's a 700 kind of build up that gets quite obnoxious when it's boosted too much.
and you
And that is in his voice. And that's where a fancy Soothe plugin is just amazing. But what I would typically do now without the fancy plugins is actually compress again lightly. This is what we were talking about earlier. Caleb was talking about serial compression. So again, if I go for like an R comp, which has no real flavor, it's just a generic, you know, whatever your stock compressor plugin will do this.
and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. And you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline. You were the catalyst.
Now I still hear a little bit of that that's 700. I also hear a little bit of potential de-essing to do. What I would do before anything at all is actually run de-essing at the beginning of the track. So now that we're exaggerating with some of that high-end boost, let's go and grab a de-esser.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now you once lit me up like a cigarette.
Yeah, that 5K-ish area is where it's harshest. So here again is, you know, the Waves de-esser. Again, don't have to use Waves. Any stock one will work. But doing it right at the beginning means you're not going to be boosting unwanted frequencies. So the last thing I want to do is, do a high-end boost and then put the de-esser after that. If I can do it earlier on, it would be much better results.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
So let's move that across a bit. I'm going to swap out this first REQ 2-band for a 4-band.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you...
So there's a few things. There's that sort of 450, which is pretty ugly. Now, we could use, if you have access to it, dynamic EQs, meaning as it gets built up excessively, it just ducks it there. That would be one easy way of doing it. Without those tools, I would literally just be cutting around about this area.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
Like, there's a bit of a cut there, but for instance, if we were going to grab the plugin we've been talking about I've been talking about non-stop. Oh, do you even have it? Do you have the OX sound?
Soothe.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. I always thought it had their name first. And Wheel of Death.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this, you were the gasoline. You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this, you were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
Now, if you use the depth control, so I'm just highlighting areas that I don't like, and like around about 500-600. So it's going to get anywhere from like 400 to 700. The mid-range always defaults in here.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now
The in-ear is still killing me.
you once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me. You once...
But what I like about using dynamic EQs or multi-bands, etc., which I never used to use, is that once you can get in there and identify stuff and start pulling it out, you can then brighten it afterwards. You just got to be careful with any of these kinds of wonderful, clever plugins, is that you fall in love with them and you fall in love with what they do, and before you know it, you've pulled out all these different frequencies, and you may have killed the excitement in the vocal. Bob Clearmount and I, good name drop, yeah, were talking about this a few months ago, and he was saying that some of the stuff is just starting to sound really boring. So be careful. This is a rock song, so a little bit of edge, a little bit of not quite right, a little bit of, we could have used 1% more de-essing isn't necessarily a bad thing. So don't be afraid to do that.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this, you were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
So sometimes you end up with a lot of plugins on it, but not doing that much. Soothe is doing quite a lot of control, and it's a pretty remarkable plugin.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this, you were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
There's definitely a lot of sizzle going on up there.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
That's what we started with.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned.
I think in our endeavor to kill some of those mids, and this is a good point to go back, we actually got rid of some of the inherent part of his vocal that we liked. So I'm actually going to kill this cut there.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down.
It's interesting with his voice because he has this kind of spikiness to it. It almost sounds like comb filtering.
You once lit me up up like a
because you're getting like these huge boosts and then cuts. You know, it's really his voice. And you know, if I didn't know better and somebody sent me this, I'd be like, is this comb filtering?
I didn't know you'd come and go. You once lit
You see you hear what I'm saying, Caleb? It's really interesting in his voice. I've noticed it when I've been mixing it before that I ended up doing a lot more compression and EQ than I normally would because I was trying to push different frequencies up.
You said you were using a U87 on this?
Yeah, U87.
I found the
Probably
U87 can kind of exacerbate this in some male voices sometimes.
Yeah, I did the second record on a U47, which didn't have quite the same issues, but there's definitely something about his voice.
It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night.
But with a song like this, I can get away with a murder because I printed a Echoplex, which I love, and I distorted it, hit it really hard. So let's throw that in.
You once lit me up like a cigarette.
And suddenly, magically, everything starts to sound good. It's like it works for the track.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
Let's go where the full band comes in.
It was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol.
Still very wispy, so this is just the way I work. So all of those, this is what happens when you work in solo. You know, so I'm now bringing some of this top end boost that I did down because it's nice, but it's starting to hear the zzz. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a lot of modern pop music. I don't know if you've noticed this, where I see like a 2K spike in the vocal the whole time. You've been hearing that, Caleb, where you hear this zzz across the vocal the whole time. It's obviously deliberate. I can't believe that the mixers doing it aren't noticing it. But I think what it does is it pulls your ear in because you hear this zzz and it doesn't disappear. And it stays on every phrase.
Insane.
It drives you insane, that 2K thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's weird with 2K because there is actually something, 2K on its own is one of the most offensively disgusting frequencies ever. But in a master, I don't know if you do it, if you put about a half dB of 2K over the mix, it gives a kind of a glassiness to the master. You know what I mean? It's got this kind of almost, it's like a shine to it. And it is really nice for vocals, but you cannot overdo it. If it's a sizzle like that, yeah, it drives me nuts. But I wonder actually whether it's just naivety of people using a lot of fancy plugins that have actually created that, or whether it's a deliberate thing to add that kind of little distorted 2K on it. You have a theory on it?
I wondered if it's everyone using that Sony mic.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Not a huge fan of that Sony mic.
A lot of the pop vocals and the rap vocals, top 40 stuff, they're all using that Sony 900 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I've wondered if that has something to do with it, if it has a because you find all these frequencies in different mics, like the U87 kind of does a thing around 10K. My Soyuz does a thing around 8K. I wonder if that has like a bitiness to it, which is, it kind of gives it that sound. But then when you compress it and polish, it kind of exacerbates it, I think, maybe. Or it's an auto-tune thing.
Right, that's true, yeah.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
You're right, it could be, maybe it's an artifact. It's an artifact of something that's being used, yeah. You might well be right.
Last call.
Now, we're going to come back, just so everybody knows. When we're mixing, and I'm not sure, I haven't been looking at the comments, I'm doing everything incrementally. I'm working slow because I'm explaining everything I'm doing, but I'm doing everything incrementally, and these things will change as I bring in other instruments and other stuff happens. I'm just getting to that place where I'm sort of, it makes everything make sense to me. Now, the H3000 is a detuning trick that I do. So if I just group this together, it's not meant to be very loud. Like if you listen to it loud, it sounds awful.
You once lit me up.
Well, maybe not awful, but it definitely sounds strange.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's.
However, done quietly, it can push the vocal forward.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's.
Throw in the echoplex as well.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
Let's try in and out of the track so you can hear the difference.
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a.
I got that from, I think it was a Pink Floyd track. It's a Dave Gilmour thing where they would detune his voice, sharp and flat multiple times with an H3000. I've had, over the years, I've got quite close with the Eventide guys. They're one of my favorite companies to work with because they pretty much invented digital effects. I mean, they were making the H910 in like 1973 or 4. Jack told me they used it on both Toys in the Attic and Rocks. And he said they would like bring down like the Instaflanger. They'd like bring down the prototype to the studio when they were mixing in New York. And so I have a massive respect for them. So the H3000 is one of my favorite things. This, for those of you who've got the multi-tracks, this is a real H3000 that I printed.
I'm actually excited to see you use this. I've tried to follow that trick with the H3000 because I've seen a lot of guys use it, and I've just never been able to make it sound great, at least in the style of music I work with. So
you got to tuck it in. It's basically inaudible but audible. It's almost like you want it to hear it and then turn it so you can't hear it. But then when you mute it, you realize the vocal isn't quite as forward as it was before.
It was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so far gone. Another night on Sunset Boulevard. This is a walk away from all the dirty little games you play.
So
Cool.
How did you record that? Is that 3 different takes running through the H3000, or what is that?
No, it's just a lead vocal going through in mono and then being detuned. So one side goes +3, the other one goes minus, then it goes +6, minus, +9, minus.
Got it.
And then just randomize it so it's not all flat on one side and not all sharp on the other. And and the great thing about doing it is every time you print it, it's slightly different. And it's a random kind of detuning effect that just kind of helps the vocal. I'll never push it loud. It's just subtle. Yeah.
It was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so far gone.
Young Roberto, I do have to use the bathroom quickly. So
let's do a 5-minute break for everybody. Everyone can refill on coffee, bathroom break.
thank you, Caleb.
Yes, we usually do this. We're 2 hours in. We should definitely take a bathroom break, coffee break. And we'll see everyone back in a solid 5 minutes. Great stuff so far. Excited to see the rest.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I was like, there's probably at some point I should probably use the bathroom.
I imagine it's pretty good.
$1,000?
Maybe, yeah. Which would be a lot for one bed, but around here that's probably
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe one day. I'm keeping an eye out for spaces. I would like a bigger studio
Yeah.
where I can actually do some get kit and stuff. So I'm keeping an eye out for spaces. So maybe one day we'll do that again.
I've built so many studios. I'm not in a hurry to build anymore.
Right, you just moved.
I know. I'm just like, I know, and I've got studio back in LA. It's like, I really, Caleb, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got to try and be gone by 7, or my wife will kill me.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and like fly through some stuff, and then tomorrow, of course, keep going, and also, do the reverb stuff, etc. as well.
Yes, sounds good.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm ready whenever you are.
Rock and roll, my friend. Let's just keep EQing and compressing, get everything going. It's already sounded so much better. I mean, from where we first play, I don't know if everyone remembered the first kind of run through today. It sounded great already, but the drums are sitting so much better now. The bass is sitting so much better. Everything's starting to gel. Now let's get these guitars sitting really nice, and we'll be pretty good.
Excellent. All right. Speaking of drums, I want to listen to them quickly. Excuse me. I feel like. Sorry, I mean, just cough. I was like, I coughed over here, and I looked around like, oh, I'm coughing at Rob. So, yeah. Speaking of drums, I want to see that kick. I think I just want to put a tiny bit of compression on it. I feel like the low end is just gets loud a little bit here and there. So let's bring that ratio down. Oh, that's a little too dramatic. So that's going to be interesting when it comes to Caleb mastering this. What he's going to do, I want to make sure that low end is nicely controlled. Carry on.
Before we're done today, I'm actually going to have you throw a Paz on the master, and we're going to look at that curve that I was talking about earlier and see kind of where we are with all the frequencies. This will just be in real time. So an example of kind of some of that mastering mindset.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Paz as well. I'm glad you are. I've been using it, since 1851 when it first came out. It's pretty good, to be honest.
Warren, can you change a couple things for me on there? Change the LF res to 10.
Yep.
Change detect to RMS. Over to the right.
Okay.
And then the response to like 400. So this is you can see just based on that orange line, I was talking about a gentle slope from 60-ish down to 16K. We're already in the ballpark of that. And I've just listened to enough music through the Paz that's already mixed and mastered to know that's kind of what you want to look like. There's not a ton of major frequency stuff going on that is going to be an issue for a master at all.
I'm actually quite happy with the low end.
Yep, it's not out of bounds whatsoever. Nope.
Yeah. Okay, we can probably get tighter in on there, and we haven't got the guitars screaming in some of those mids, which is a little wonky at the moment. But Okay, I'm going to do some automation stuff specifically because I need to make this work.
It was last call.
I'm going to copy down that REQ because it's essentially just wiping off some of the excessive low lows.
Oh, we talked all night, but you were so far gone. I'm so sad, but
And I need to do this because this is a little too distorted for the kind of U2 thing that I'm doing. So I'm actually going to, oh, well, we can talk about compression. I'm going to grab a compressor here. Sorry. Oh, the other thing is I'm not using a mouse. I'm using a pad. What do you call this? Like a
Trackpad.
trackpad for those of you. And I'm actually not used to using it. So if I see a little slow today, that's my excuse.
Rob, I didn't know you used one of those. That's what I use. But anyone I have over who wants to use a mouse, they're just like totally lost. So hats off to Warren. That's actually not the easiest thing.
I've been trying to figure it out. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually using the default attack and release time because the attack is a little slower, so it's helping exaggerate some of those some of the attack of the transients of the original notes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a delay, and we can just grab, I don't know, what do we got in here? I don't know, actually never used the Manny Marroquin delay. Is it good?
We're gonna let Warren cheat a little bit here.
Yeah, I've got to because I need to get that verse guitar to sound better. I've never used this before. Does it have a way to sync?
Yeah. So if you go, it's on link, and then if you want to do,
I was just on and host.
yeah. So then exactly, but then if you want to do milliseconds, you can flick it.
Okay, no, I'll have it sync. Oh. Cool. So I've got dotted eighth note, which is what I'm going for that, which is of course the classic U2 guitar.
Right.
Then link to off if you want to do different on left and right.
Oh, so I can cheat as a reverb.
I like this plugin.
I do. I like this plugin.
All in one place.
Yeah. Manny, what have you done? You've got a really good plugin, Manny.
it wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so.
So I'm actually favoring the DI with that effect on it. So I'll quickly tell you what I did. So I put a tiny amount of distortion just to make it sound a little bit more real. Got some verb on it, tried the doubler, I actually like it, and a little bit of the phaser, and it's on dotted eighths. We could, for Schnitz and Sniggles, let's see what it sounds like if I do a dotted 16th on one side and eighth on the other. Oh, is it linked? Okay. Great, I'm learning something here too. killing me, that snare energy there. Even with the boost that we did,
This is a walk away.
you can see the overheads there just get weak. I'm a big fan of the omni-channel. I would say that Andrew did a really good job on this because it's actually all very straightforward. He didn't do anything particularly clever. He just took all of the really good things that I like about the Waves plugins and put it all in one, which is very smart. That default there at 3K, well, 2890s, bringing up some of the bottom snare, which may or may not be good. A little better.
Gone.
So what I did is I essentially just brightened it.
Another night on Sunset Boulevard.
No, I don't like it. See, in the track, that's the danger of soloing. See, it was great, but now all the bite is all I'm hearing, and now the snare gets reduced to being all bitey and bright. So I'm going to pull those boosts back really dramatically.
Another night on Sunset Boulevard. This is a walk away from all the dirty little games you play. Yeah, I heard your stories, but I saw.
Yeah, so this is why we need to get into the panning, unfortunately, because we need to get those guitars out of the way of the snare and then see where we're at. So let's So what I'm going to do is grab this guitar here all the way through to the end of the chorus. And even though it is pan day tomorrow.
No. Pan is part of volume, so you're good with pan.
Okay.
Pan
Yeah,
is part of
but sorry, I meant automation. I know it's automation day.
You can automate pan. It's totally fine.
Okay, good.
It's all that's all volume, because you're just essentially
Yeah.
adjusting the volume from side to side, and even if you're doing automation, totally fine.
Cool.
This is a walk away from all the dirty little games. Yeah, I heard you. I gave you.
Actually coming up quite a lot higher on that. I'm already up to 150.
Little games you play. Yeah, I heard your stories, but I saw.
That's the thing with the AC15, which I was using, is it's very mid-rangey.
From all the dirty little games you play. Yeah, I heard your stories, but I saw no change. Gave you love, you gave me hate. Yeah, lit me up like a cigarette.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab these. I'm going to grab all these guitars that we've been working on and bust them. So Brendan's guitar, which was live off the floor, has no DI. Just so you know. but let's grab all of these. At least all of the rhythms. Yeah, we'll do all the rhythms, and I'm going to dump those into a stereo bus. Next available is 5 and 6. Ah, wrong. Still not used to this keyboard. There we go. Yeah, I was doing a plus on it.
It does seem like they change the layout every time they release a new keyboard.
Well, of course.
It's slightly different every time.
Just to mess with my mind. Mess with my mind. All right. Okay. Just call it rhythm guitar. It's amazing how thick that guitar still is.
Yeah, I heard your stories, but I saw no last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so far gone. Another night on Sunset Boulevard. This is a walk away from all the dirty little games you play. This last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but walk away from all the dirty little games you play. Yeah, I heard your stories, but I saw no change. I gave you love, you gave me hate. Oh yeah, lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline.
So we didn't use any auto tune on that.
Yeah, lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
And quite often what I'll do on a tambourine is like either, like I said, distort the high end, or frankly just put a de-esser on it. I don't know how everybody else's ears are, but goodness, I hate loud tambourines, loud shakers just drive me nuts.
Yeah, lit me up like a
Like my hat as well. I like my hat to be like, not pss, 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 pss. It's maybe it just breaks me out in hives and makes me think of bad 80s music when you know, ponytails and pss, pss.
yeah, lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You
There is a driving DI I can hear in there. Is that the
lit me up.
yeah. So what we're going to do is mute that.
Oh yeah, lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left.
So more panning stuff. So when this doubles up in these sections, I'm actually going to pan them slightly wide, not full 100%. It's not a 90s R&B track, but I'm going to just pan them a little wide just to give them a bit of width.
Yeah, lit me up like a cigarette, and you burn me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline, you were the catalyst. And don't you know, it won't be easy letting this love go. And it was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so far gone. Another night on sunset.
Cool. Caleb, I'm going to hand it over to you. Do you want to talk about the PAS frequency analyzer? I think there's a couple of more like guitar stuff here that I've got to do just for some.
Well, it'll be interesting to pull in a reference. If you have a good one, we could pull it in and compare and just see if we're in a ballpark sonically to the other reference.
Well, I mean, I've got the original mix that I did on this.
For the sake of what students would normally do, though, they would want to pull in a reference that's in a similar genre, but that's really well mixed and mastered. If we have one, I don't know if Rob could find one really quick and pop it over to you.
I'm not sure if I feel quite close enough to that at the moment.
This is a walk away from all the dirty little games you play. Yeah, I heard your stories, but it was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so far gone. Another night on Sunset Boulevard. This is a walk away from all the dirty little games.
What I want to do,
And it's also okay if you're not there yet, because I think it's just, like a lot of people will pull that stuff up and check themselves, and they'll see the difference, which I think is really, really valuable. But you don't have to do that until you're you feel good about it.
yeah, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it yet, because the way I work is I will do some additional stuff. Like I want to put the snare verb on. When we're doing space stuff, I would like to hear the snare verb to see how much I want to push the snare still. I like the rooms, but I want to hear an artificial reverb, a reverb on the snare for excitement, particularly in the pre-choruses on the choruses.
And to be clear, we're only comparing the reference to the PAS. We're putting a PAS on each and just seeing general frequency balance at this point. So yeah, it's not.
But for me, a big part,
reverbs and stuff won't do too much with that. They'll do a little.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, for me, to get the snare the way I want it to be, I want to hear like what a verb will do to the snare, because I might adjust other things around it. To me,
for sure.
To me, I'm always working on all things at all times. Do you know what I mean?
That's what happens eventually. You got to start with kind of really systematic processes, really kind of speed up everything. And then at some point your brain switches and you can hold more information. You kind of know where everything is.
Right.
Though sometimes it's always good to come back to the fundamentals, no matter how far away we are. But what more do you want to do on this before we break for the day? You have about 20 more minutes.
I think I would just like to look at a snare verb just so I can push it in sections.
All right, we'll let you cheat again.
Shh.
It's no problem.
Walk away from all the dirty little games you play.
Me cheat? No. Never.
Hey, 10 years ago when I first watched your first video, I didn't think there would come a day where I was telling you can cheat. So
Oh,
I'll just sit back and just be pretty happy that you're here.
oh, well, this is fun. Okay, I'm going to take the snare top. Bring down some of that. that's the snare top is what's going to feed my reverb. And I'm going to go for something pretty generic. And by generic, I mean just what comes stock with the DAW. So whatever you guys and girls are using, just grab that. I'm using about 3/4 of a second. I think it's pretty close to the real room itself. It's pretty invisible. You know, once it's in there, it's soaking it up. Let's do your Paz trick. I still think there's lots of bits and pieces to do, but yeah, El Paz trick would be good.
Rock and roll. I'm all.
Yeah. Rob's going to grab a reference.
Right.
I want to cheat so badly.
So yeah, I know. So as it stands now, if you were to send me this master, here's what I would do. I would probably end up actually boosting some of that low end more, so that kick and bass would come through ever so slightly more.
Cool.
And I would probably clean up a little bit of the mids, which means there's probably some more carving we can do in the relationship between the vocals and the guitars sitting in there. You know, just a little bit more aggressive there, but
the guitars have had no high mid boosts yet.
Yeah, no high mid boost, but also around that 3 to 800 range, there seems to be some buildup That's what the Paz is telling us right now. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where all the guitars live at the moment. So if you listen to like the distorted guitars, it's very, very narrow. There's like nothing, there's barely anything going on up here. So that's too harsh. But if I was to go in and do probably something similar on this one.
Yep, something similar on this one, except maybe a little lower on the dip. And this is what I was talking about in the presentation. We're finding the most valuable characteristics here.
Yeah, this one's very nosy. Again, yeah, the characteristics of an AC15 and a Junior are all mids, and mids with a bit more mids thrown in.
Yep.
It's interesting. Now, if I was retracking this, I probably would have gone. I would have changed out the amps on the main rhythms.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's interesting what just happened. I hope everyone heard that. Just those moves there, and we can go back to the Paz and look at it. We'll see it actually live. That just all of a sudden there's less like kind of mud build up there. The vocals were able to kind of even sit forward just slightly. So if you reset and clear that, if you hit clear and replay that section with the vocals, we're going to see that 300 to 800 bump is going to be more tamed now.
I gave you love, you gave me hate. Yeah. Lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
Yeah, it's got a very 90s kind of crystalled algae guitar sound now, where it was all just energy. You listen to some of those records, and they're just not what modern heavy is. Modern heavy now is like literally 20 to 20k. It's just like it's just like grah, you know. And in those days, in the 90s, the guitars were just like they were just bratty, you know. It's but this is what we want more. We want more bratty than full-blown metal. We were really trying to give this personality as opposed to like trying to just do a mess.
And this is where the reference comes in, because I'm basing it off of nothing right now, just basing it off of the curve that you generally see, you know. But if we pull if we pull in a reference, though, we may see that it wants that mid-range, right? And then we go, okay, we're exactly where we should be. So this is kind of the fun that I was talking about earlier, and such a great way for all of you to regardless of the quality of your rooms, to start to connect these things together. And it's going to change fundamentally how you start doing your mixes. One's in chat if this is valuable stuff we're talking about right now.
Let's see what we've got here.
Rock and roll.
Anything take your fancy? We could do some, let's see, 90s. I think I've got some stuff from HD tracks as well. These days I do a lot of streaming straight from Tidal, but I've got some stuff downloaded here. In your honor? I guess it doesn't really matter.
Sometimes it takes a second to find a really good reference. You know,
I mean, if
the
we're
Fray
just
would have
looking,
some good stuff.
how do I open several plugins at once in Pro Tools? You have to hold a button.
I actually only just open them one at a time. So
That's crazy.
Sorry.
Okay. We can potentially use the analyzer here. So let's
Yeah,
actually-
rip my idea with Paz. So someone should know. Hold shift and click, says Ryan.
shifting back.
There we go. Ryan saved the day.
I gave you love, you gave fashion to me. Rest again.
So if we grab like if I clear this,
There, yeah.
I gave you love, you gave me. Hey, yeah. Lift me up.
Put one just Paz directly on the reference.
yeah, okay, hold on.
Bring it into the session. It's just like a really nice way to see like side to side.
So we'll do so now we should have
I gave you love, you gave me.
Just change the settings on the Paz there. Yeah.
I gave you love, you gave me.
and let's actually clear this. I think this is the second one. Let's just check. So this one should be, yeah. So this is after this.
So which one's which?
So yeah, if anyone is trying to do this, that's one way you can do it.
Yep. So
There's a few ways you could do this, but
we're seeing
having-
exactly what I was talking about. There's about 3 dB more low end, and there's actually a comparable amount of the mid range there. We're actually right in the ballpark, maybe a hair high end of the very, very top stuff. But that's really great for mastering to do. That's not a huge problem in the mix if you have some highs to generally add. You don't want to overcook your highs, send to master, because then they can't do any like beautiful kind of high end boosts. So look how close those are based upon just Warren's ears getting it right in line with another well mixed and mastered track there. That's really, really cool. Is everyone seeing that? Anyone have any questions about that?
I think the thing that I would add is this becomes even more important, A, when you're starting out, B, when you're not in a perfectly tuned room, because there is no necessary objective standard. There might be norms, but if you're in a good room, you've been doing this for a while, you've got a good ear, you can take those risks and maybe vary from the norm a little bit more. You don't necessarily have to do this, but if you're in a room that could be lying to you, or you're not using, a really good set of headphones, or if you're not as experienced as this, it's going to give you kind of a third party independent view that that's going to really help you and help you know how far you are from that baseline, or at least that industry norm.
You'll need it less and less as time goes on, but I still use it. I'll pull it up right at my very last thing, just in case my ears started playing tricks on me, or I started kind of getting used to something that wasn't quite right. And I go, oh, look at that little thing. It usually points me to one little thing or something like that. So always good to keep an objective foundation through the process. Make sure you're right in line with this stuff.
Awesome.
Marvelous.
Rock and roll.
Any action items today, Caleb?
Yes, let's go back to that. One sec here.
Still screen share.
No, I got it. Just pulling up the right keynote here.
Save this as well.
That's not the right one.
John said, many thanks, hoping you have a smooth drive home. John said, many thanks.
It's not too, it's not too crazy today with the action items. So you have your volume only mix at this point. And really it's going in using the principles you learned today, to start carving out the frequencies. I generally like to encourage like fixing problems first and see how it sounds. A lot of people start enhancing, but if you enhance too early, then you might be putting band-aids over something that would have solved itself when you fix. So fix what you hear first, get everything falling in line, and then enhance. And the same thing with compression. Use dynamic tools to I bet if we bounce this down to a stereo track, what you would see is something that has pretty well controlled dynamics already. So make sure that you have that. And then if you want to, again, there's free analyzers out there. The PAS is only like $30 from Waves if you want to use that one. The key, once again, the key with all of that though is make sure you listen to some music through it, because they all kind of have a different shape to that curve. PAS has that tilt. A lot of other ones, it's kind of looking flat, and that's what accurate means. So just make sure you know how to use the tool you use, and go through, do the EQing, do the remaining dynamic stuff. Be untempted to use any spatial stuff yet. And tomorrow, I'm really, really excited. Warren is such a master at this. I hope you all tune back in. He's going to show us how to really do space the right way, but also how to get that vocal sounding 100% pro, just like that that legendary stuff that he's mixed in the past. So day 3 is massive. It's huge. It's going to be a ton of fun. In the meantime, have a great evening. Let us know if you have any questions. Feel free to post your upgraded mix in school, get feedback. That's what it's all about. Thanks for being such a great community. Thanks for the great questions today, and you helping each other in the chat. Continue to help each other in the school group. Again, community is what it's all about. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Much love to all of you. Be safe and have a good evening. Have a good one.